How's it going, everybody? So in this video, we're going to be discussing the very important topic that I have a ton of experience with, which is I have an autoimmune condition or a digestive disease or something like that, and I've seen thousands of people heal on a carnivore diet, okay, or some kind of elimination diet. But when I tried the carnivore diet or when I tried an extreme elimination diet, to resolve my psoriasis, my Crohn's disease, my lupus or fibromyalgia, or my, chronic arthritis. When I tried to heal my autoimmune condition on a carnivore diet, I did not have the same success that everybody else did. Okay? So we're going to be addressing this question in this video. There's a lot of reasons why a carnivore diet might not actually completely resolve your health issue, but there's a lot of things to discuss. Please watch this entire video if you really want to get to the bottom of what's causing your health condition. Most people, their main problem is they're neurotic and they cannot concentrate on one diet at a time long enough to even tell if it's working or not. Or they can't watch one video or read one entire book all the way through, and so they never actually gain the full insights required or needed to actually understand a subject enough to heal from it. Unfortunately, the number one cause of most people's issues is a lack of patience, a lack of follow-through. It's a lot of it is definitely mental and behavioral. At the core and at the root. And once you can actually develop the follow through and the focus and the commitment or dedication to a protocol, then you can actually start to make progress. That's what it took for me, and that's what it takes for most people. You don't get progress from yo-yoing around from one diet to another. That's how you end up like the famous YouTuber Vegetable Police, who basically has hypochondria and is just like claiming he healed all of his conditions on a vegan diet, then a carnivore diet, then the medical medium diet. And it's like, bro, you say the same freaking shit about every diet that you do. So anyway, so let's dive into the actual subject here. Okay, so the first thing, okay, if you're actually trying to heal an autoimmune condition on a carnivore diet, okay, understand that the main reason why most people heal on carnivore diets is because they have either gut dysbiosis, like their intestinal wall or the intestinal lining is damaged, and so when they consume foods that are mostly digested in the intestine, that's mostly plant matter and just plant matter overall, but especially fibrous plant matter. Okay, some of these molecules either irritate the gut or they supposedly seep through the gut lining and trigger an autoimmune or an immune reaction, because the body deals with it as a foreign invader or a foreign body. Kind of like if you were to have a infection of some kind. And then these immune molecules can come into the bloodstream, and because it's an abnormal response that wasn't dealt with in previous human evolution, the immune reaction starts to attack various parts of the body, whether it's the brain and multiple sclerosis or the joints and connective tissue, in the case of something like arthritis, or the skin in a case like psoriasis, right? Now, there's a lot of kind of underlying root causes that can contribute to this. A lot of people, they have small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, which is basically where the intestine the small intestine. So basically when you consume mostly fermentable carbohydrates like potatoes, beans, legumes, tubers, any kind of leaf or vegetable, and a lot of fruits like FODMAPs. If you're not familiar, Google search what FODMAPs are. Certain fermentable carbohydrates and fibers, they prematurely start to ferment and digest in the wrong part of the intestine, okay? And this causes, probiotics, what are thought of as healthy bacteria, to actually start to proliferate and grow too soon in the intestine, okay? So that you get bacterial growth, which is normally healthy if it's further down the intestine. It starts to grow in the small intestine, and it starts to overgrow to the point where you start to get abnormal fermentation and pains and discomfort, and even pathogenic organisms can start to grow. Pathogenic just meaning that whatever bacteria or whatever is growing in there contributes to pain, discomfort, and negative side effects that you would otherwise not want. And so if you just eliminate all fermentable fibers, which is basically what elimination diet tends to do, or carnivore diet, regardless of the food type, what can happen is you don't see those symptoms anymore. And this is, mostly in regards to things like Crohn's disease and intestinal discomfort. Because the abnormal bacteria in the small intestine that's not supposed to be there, it starts to die off, okay? And then later on, you can slowly reintroduce these fibrous plant foods. This is something that I actually eventually did. After about 2 years of a strict no-fiber carnivore diet, I was able to start to add in little bits of soaked, fermented oatmeal and brown rice, okay? But if I did too much too soon, then I would start to see all of my irritable bowel syndrome symptoms coming back. And you can slowly start to build your intestinal flora in where it's supposed to be over time. Anyway, the point is, though, the carnivore diet removes the fermentable fibers that are abnormally fermenting in the small intestine. In this case, with SIBO, or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. Okay, so that's one aspect, is SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. The other one would be something like Candida albicans, or Candida albicans, or what people know as like Candida overgrowth or fungal overgrowth, okay? And this is a really big thing that people focus on. Look, making YouTube videos about health and nutrition is very, very hard when you have all the experience and knowledge that I do, because I see so many people who automatically self-diagnose themselves with things because of these like experts on YouTube, even if they're doctors or whatever, who speak in absolute terms and convince you that you have a disease that you haven't actually tested yourself for. And this is a case with like Candida albicans, okay? When I was dealing with my problems, was convinced I had Candida. I did the spit test and all this other crap. And it turns out my problems were a lot simpler than that. But anyway, so the idea of Candida albicans, okay? Candida essentially is a naturally occurring fungal organism that naturally occurs in the intestine in the digestive tract of most humans, or of all humans, okay? We naturally have Candida. The same way that we all have, what's the other, there's another bacteria that, Salmonella, right? I believe it's Salmonella. Maybe I'm wrong, but like I believe Salmonella and some of these other bacteria that sometimes are claimed to contaminate food, especially plant foods, believe it or not, naturally occur in the human organism already. I believe there's a certain degree of strep that occurs naturally in many humans. And it's just interesting that we see these things as purely bad or negative or pathogenic, when in reality we all carry these organisms overall. These things only overgrow or turn pathogenic when there is some kind of severe imbalance in the body. And this is usually created by artificial means, okay? This is where the kind of mechanisms as to what causes Candida can get fuzzy, because it completely depends on the worldview that you view nutrition through. But the big one is, and I've seen this as a huge commonality between most people that deal with these problems. So typically, a human being will go through, someone will go through a round of antibiotics, maybe for a week, maybe for a couple weeks, maybe for a couple months, or maybe a very short period of time, but over and over again for a long time until eventually you just ruin your intestinal flora or whatever. And then and usually people are pounding sugar and refined carbs on the side because they never had health problems before. And the combination of the antibiotics and the refined carbs that they're eating develop, an overgrowth of Candida or pathogens. So, killing off your intestinal flora artificially through these like pharmaceutical antibiotics. This is a common thing that happens before people have these extreme problems. You see this in combat sports and athletes all the time where they have an injury or they, whatever, and then they go through a round of antibiotics, and then you see people like Gordon Ryan and some of these other like high-level athletes who are never the same after that. And this was the case with me, okay, due to a staph infection from some free tattoos I got from a friend and some other things. Literally like a year after that, all sorts of health problems started to ensue. That only got better when I completely eliminated mostly whole grains, beans, nuts, and seeds, including cacao, by the way. But anyway, so let's continue. So, Candida albicans, essentially, in order to kill off Candida, okay, carnivore should be enough. The problem is it takes time for the pathogenic organism to die off, okay? Depending on what experts you follow, you're going to hear a lot of different underlying causes of or things that Candida feeds on, okay? I've heard from some people, they claim that Candida consumes polyunsaturated fats. Other people said animal fats. Some people say animal protein or amino acids. In my experience and from what I've seen from most people, Candida albicans, as well as small intestinal bacterial overgrowth as well, they feed mostly on fermentable carbohydrates, refined carbohydrates especially. So things like sugar, white rice, and things like that. So I found that Candida is a lot of refined carbs, for sure, okay? As well as lactose and dairy products. So when I was dealing with this and it was really bad, I noticed my Candida symptoms and the whatever biomarkers, were being tested at the time. Okay, I don't want to get too deep in that, but I was working with a practitioner at a certain point in time. For whatever reason, it was the casein protein in dairy, as well as lactose, and white rice, sucrose, so like table sugar. Those things were directly contributing to the growth of to the overgrowth of Candida at that time. And my symptoms of my fungal symptoms went away completely when I removed mostly dairy, casein protein, and refined carbohydrates, including white jasmine rice, which a lot of people think is just fine, because of there's no anti-nutrients in it, bro, but it still feeds that bacteria. And this is another reason why you might want to think twice about these if it fits your macros diets and that sugar is just healthy. Most of that's just coming from people who only care about fat loss and body composition. Usually these people are on steroids, just saying. Or they're funded by, like, whatever. For small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, it was fibrous foods, okay? So SIBO has a separate set of symptoms. And it was mostly the whole grains, beans, nuts, and seeds, okay, for the SIBO. So what you want to do in this, if it's SIBO or bacterial overgrowth, or if it's Candida, if you suspect that, you need to commit to a 100% zero fiber, carnivorous diet, okay, for a minimum of, okay, if we're being honest, 4 months, for 4 fucking months, okay? And this frustrates me because people, they'll do this shit for like 2 weeks and then give up, and then just be like, it must be some other crazy thing like EMFs in the air or like heavy metal toxicity or some crazy shit like that. And it's like, man, you haven't even, you don't have a clue yet. You got, so 2 weeks, for 4 months, 4 months at least, okay? Starting, and that's to remove the food source of the pathogenic bacteria, and any pathogenic organism, okay? That's the first thing, is you need to remove the food source, okay? And if you're eating mostly animal foods, especially ruminant animals like beef, okay, don't worry about fat intake and this other crap, okay? Just remove the food source of the organism that's causing your health problem, okay? And do the type that most people are experiencing benefits on, okay? The majority of people who do these protocols and heal from it, they're eating cooked meat, okay? Most of the science on this subject and evolutionary history, as well as people that suffer from these diseases, okay, it all points towards cooking your meat to improve the breakdown and the digestion of the food. But you'll find a lot of like weird people in YouTube comments and stuff, and these health experts that clearly have mental issues like Sverige and freaking Frank Tufano and some other ones. And even Augenus Wander Planets. And if you read his fucking book and actually believe the shit it says about how he found, then you're gullible, man. And there's no way there's no helping you. Like, people who believe the shit that Augenus Wander Planet says in his book, okay? I'm not saying that the primal diet is bad or something. I'm not saying his health recommendations are bad. But the logic behind how he found these things, okay? Like some wolves found, he was trying to kill himself by eating raw meat, and supposedly wolves brought him raw meat to him or some shit. If you believe that stuff, then you lack the critical thinking skill that is absolutely necessary to actually decipher facts and truth and evidence and accurate information from bullshit. It's just insane to me. Like, but this is where whatever. Okay. So maybe IQ is genetic. Who knows? I don't know, man. I can't even explain that level of idiocy. Okay. As far as like believing Augenus Wander Planets, but like raw meat, I can understand why some people will buy into that. But anyway, cook your fucking meat, damn it. Okay, please. And fucking commit to the carnivore diet for like 4 freaking months to remove all possible food sources for SIBO, for freaking Candida. Okay? And then the next thing you need to do is, the other thing is a lot of people, especially if you have a history of plant-based eating, especially meat-free diets of any kind, whether it's vegetarian, vegan, liquid diets, even long periods of fasting and caloric restriction. So people don't understand that your gut motility starts to slow down if you are under-eating for long periods of time. This is a common symptom of a medical condition that's commonly mistaken as overtraining syndrome. It's known as relative energy deficiency in sport, also known as REDS. Okay, or I like to call it relative energy deficiency syndrome. It's essentially accidental anorexia. And with people that really care about their health and they do these crazy protocols like juice fasting and stuff like that, they have a tendency towards extreme dietary restriction that can contribute. And so what happens is your entire metabolism slows down when you go on these types of diets. People mistake metabolism for your rate of fat loss. The fact is, metabolism is regulated by your thyroid. When your metabolism speeds up, all processes in the body speeds up as well. If we're talking metabolism, the scientific term, we're talking the rate of basically the thyroid. Okay, and so basically you're going to get increased anxiety, increased thinking and thoughts. You're going to get increased gut motility and digestion, increased body temperature, all of that stuff, which will be pretty negative, obviously. And when you have low metabolism, so to speak, okay, basically you get hypothyroidism is what you can think of it as. Slow gut motility, low energy, slow thinking, brain fog. You feel like food just sits in your stomach forever, okay? So anyway, you need to make sure you need to make sure you're eating enough food, and if you have a history of under eating, this can all contribute. Plant-based diets can contribute. The big thing is stomach acid production goes down in those cases, okay? If you have these issues, especially if you're the type of person that can't eat meat without feeling weird, especially cooked meat, okay? If you have autoimmune conditions and digestive issues and you feel weird when you eat a food that humans have been preparing with literally we have evidence of humans cooking meat with fire now over 1 billion years now. We found this evidence, okay? Chances are in this case you probably have a stomach acid issue as well, okay? In which case, apple cider vinegar, raw, unpasteurized with the mother, is important. When you have low stomach acid production, okay, not only are you going to have impaired digestion, especially of animal proteins, okay, large peptides of amino acids, essentially. It requires pepsin and hydrochloric acid, okay? You're also going to have an overgrowth of pathogenic organisms. One of the main primary things that keeps fungal overgrowth and bacterial overgrowth and all these things in check is your stomach pH, okay? And if you're if you've been one of these people who drinks baking soda to alkalize your freaking blood, okay, the biggest thing you're doing is neutralizing your stomach acid. Your kidneys is going to kind of be the middleman between your blood pH and what you consume. Okay, so like the baking soda doesn't really do you a whole lot of benefit, and it's basically just alkalizing your stomach and maybe making your kidneys work harder. Okay, but you know, people debate on that. Right? It's providing some bicarbonate, bro. Okay, cool, man. So. Stomach acid. You need to start to acidify your stomach using apple cider vinegar. I cannot even begin to list how many people I have helped get off of protein pump inhibitors and their antacid medications. Okay, people who think that they have chronically high stomach acid. Okay. Almost always, it's because they've actually alkalized their stomach, and these antacid medications actually can minimize symptoms to some degree, but make them worse over the long term. You need to acidify your stomach, and this is the other thing, is people are scared of that shit. It's interesting to me. All of the things that people need to do to heal, people are usually scared of it because they hear all this other shit from other people. Especially mainstream health advice. People don't want to eat the sodium because they're like, oh, high blood pressure, I'm going to die. Humans aren't meant to eat rocks. I tell them, look, eat mostly meat, remove all the possible foods that you could be intolerant to or that could be feeding these pathogenic organisms. And they're like, no, I can't just eat meat. I need vegetables and stuff for my gut flora, for fiber. I'm going to be constipated. I need to eat raw meat because of life force energy that can't actually be fucking measured or quantified and literally it has never been a limiting factor for all these other people healing, okay? Like, nah, I got to eat raw meat. I got to eat vegetables. Can't eat salt and sodium. Can't do freaking apple cider vinegar because it's not natural. It's not natural. Humans never did this before, blah, blah, blah. Or it just makes me feel weird, or like, I have acid reflux and I have too much acid, and trust me, bro, like I heard it from a doctor, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, come on, man. Can we just do the things that most people find success with and just give it a good shot for like 4 weeks, Anyway, you remove the food source of these pathogenic organisms by removing the fermentable carbohydrates, refined carbs, obviously, but also fibrous carbohydrates. Eat mostly meat for most of your nourishment, and then give your stomach the help with diluting apple cider vinegar. Okay, we're talking like 8 to 16 ounces of water mixed with apple cider vinegar. Okay, the raw, unpasteurized with the mother. You gotta start slowly though. About a teaspoon, maybe a tablespoon, 20 minutes before consuming an animal protein meal, preferably 3 times a day. And what's gonna happen is your body will be able to digest the meat better. Okay, especially after years of veganism or vegetarianism. You'll be killing off whatever pathogenic organisms might be in your intestine or your stomach. And over time, your stomach acid will start to be able to better regulate the balance of healthy flora. Okay, that's and where it's fermenting. Because a lot of the reason why small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, why these things ferment in the wrong part of the intestine, is because it's all regulated by the pH of your stomach first. Okay, that gets all of the enzymes and digestive juices ready downstream into the large intestine and yada yada. So, and I've tried enzyme supplements and all these things, and I find in probiotics, like if you know my story, I've tried fucking everything, and I've researched all this stuff back and forth, and I have a really good video on probiotics being nonsense if you're interested, with timestamps. I'll link it to you if you ask me. All right. So the next thing, histamines and oxalates, okay? This is a thing that people usually look towards, okay? Oh, and by the way, if you've been doing carnivore for 2 weeks and then you start to notice that your problem gets worse when you eat mostly meat and you remove vegetables and stuff, that is a sign that something's dying off, or maybe oxalates are kind of like, the so-called oxalate dumping might be happening. I don't really believe so much in the oxalate dumping thing, but it could be a thing. A lot of people insist that that's the case. Sally Norton has a book on it, Superfoods, Deadly Superfood, or some shit like that. You should definitely buy it and read it front to back if you're interested in oxalates. That's where all these ideas come from. But I believe it's more so like a die-off reaction. So if you freaking remove all these trigger foods and eat mostly meat, and your autoimmune condition gets worse, chances are it might not be the meat necessarily. A lot of people were eating a lot of meat before, and it's almost entirely the removal of these other foods that make it worse. And they wrongfully assume that they need these foods back in their diet, and that's why it's getting worse because they removed them. The fact is, you probably feel worse because you're having a die-off reaction of some kind, whether it's oxalate dumping or it's pathogenic organisms dying off. And you'll find it's called Herxheimer reaction, where when you start healing, your symptoms actually paradoxically get way worse before they get better. And in that case, you need to stick to that. And another thing is coconut oil. Coconut oil, okay? This can cause a lot of issues like freaking diarrhea at first and all these other things, but I'm talking raw, just like basic virgin coconut oil. There's a lot of compounds in it that are directly, antibacterial, antifungal, okay? And I used this and found that this has correlated majorly with my healing and being able to tolerate more foods again, is combining the carnivore diet, basically removing all the trigger foods and things that feed the bacteria and the pathogens, combining that with coconut oil, and also raw garlic, because raw garlic will directly kill off the fungal overgrowth and the bacteria and these other organisms, while also containing prebiotics that can potentially fortify new healthy bacteria. You don't need anything else, really, besides coconut oil and raw garlic, but especially coconut oil. Coconut oil contains lauric acid, monolaurin, as well as some of these these medium chain triglycerides that, a source of butyrate for the gut, as well as so it can actually directly cut down or break down the biofilms, okay, like the protective barrier on some of these bacteria and these fungus that they protect themselves with. So if you don't know, some of these pathogenic organisms create these like barriers, these biofilms over them, to where they can wreak havoc on your body without being touched by antibiotics and stuff like that, and your body's natural defense mechanisms. And coconut oil has some molecules in it that can go in and break down the biofilm. And it also contains some compounds in it that will directly kill off fungus as well as bacteria. And so if you've ever heard of oil pulling, where they use, sometimes sesame oil, but most commonly coconut oil, people have found complete resolution in their chronic gingivitis and tooth decay and all these other things just by swishing coconut oil around in their mouth. And I think a lot of that has to do with its antibacterial properties, as well as, providing a fat-soluble medium in which these kind of like debris and things can be carried away in. So, yeah, and in addition to that, if you're eating a low-carb or a completely carnivore diet with no fermentable carbohydrates, the coconut oil will most certainly provide you an amazing source of energy. I have found like the best mental clarity, mood boosting, and physical energy production from, a tablespoon, maybe 2 tablespoons of coconut oil in the morning. And when I first started my carnivore experiment and completely resolved my insomnia and all these other things, and set multiple PRs in my strength training and whatnot, somehow, within a matter of a couple weeks, and lost a shit ton of weight within 4 weeks, I was eating like at least 2,000 calories a day from mostly coconut oil, as well as like heavy whipping cream and butter that also contains butyrate and some of these other medium chain triglycerides and things. So anyway, I'm just saying that you'll probably notice more energy, and you'll also be, killing off a lot of that bacteria at the same time. So, and there's something to say about ketones being anti-inflammatory and potentially antibacterial and whatnot as well. But mostly what you're doing with this program is creating an inhospitable environment for these pathogenic bacteria and pathogenic organisms to thrive in. Okay? And if you do this over time, these symptoms will go away. But just remember, if you're noticing your symptoms are getting worse in the first 2 weeks of removing all plant foods, fermentable carbohydrates, and especially, refined sugar, like, these processed coconut waters and crap like that, like just stupid crap that people think is good for them, then you're probably killing off a lot of organisms, and the reason why you feel shittier is because of the die-off symptoms, okay? This is classic functional medicine 101. This was how we healed back in the days before we had these like more quack theories, like especially things like oxalates, which might be valid. And we're going to talk about oxalates in the next video. I'm going to make a part 2 where I talk about histamine and oxalates, okay? But, back in the days of Mark Hyman and the Ultramine solution, Candida and these things were were major areas of interest that people had really great results with. So I really do believe a lot of these issues people are having, if they get worse when you go on this kind of elimination diet, it is a sign of die-off, right? I mean, really. People are like, oh shit, like I went on an all-meat diet and after like a week or two, like my freaking symptoms got worse. And it's like, maybe you're having an allergic reaction to the meat, maybe. But most of these people were eating meat before, and it was actually the removal of broccoli, freaking cacao, coconut water, sugar, rice, whatever, beans, nuts, and seeds. It's removal of a lot of these plant foods and these like fermentable carbohydrates, especially, that seem to trigger like these die-off reactions. It's not really the increase in meat itself, but it might be. So yeah, it's like, well, that sounds to me like there's something detoxing from your body. And I hate that word, and I hate this scapegoat. Like, people use detox and die off and all this stuff as like a scapegoat. Like when they do raw veganism and they for 10 years are detoxing, and it's like, really, you're just malnourishing yourself. Or you do the carnivore diet and you have all these problems, and it's like, oh, it's just fucking oxalate dumping, bro. It's detoxing, bro. And it's like, is it really though? So yeah, you got to stick the elimination diet out for longer, because this elimination diet is all about giving you evidence as to what's happening. Okay, and if you only stick to it for 2 weeks and then you're just like, oh, that's long enough, I already know that it didn't work, therefore no need to really examine it any further. It's like, what the hell? No. Your symptoms got worse when you eliminate all those other things. That means we're getting closer to the answers. That means there's a correlation here. There's something going on that we need to talk deeper about and more extensively. And it could be Candida die-off. It could be oxalate dumping. It could be small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. Actually, with SIBO, I think your symptoms will just go away completely. Chances are, in this case, if carnivore didn't work for you and it gets worse, it's not SIBO. SIBO's simple as shit. It's something dying off. It's something being excreted from your body. It has something to do with the removal of those of foods that is contributing. Okay, then people, they'll add back in these oxalate foods or whatever, these high oxalate foods like cacao and spinach and broccoli and whatnot, and then they're like, well, my symptoms are better now, haha. It's like, okay, right? They're like, yeah, so I'm just gonna keep eating this way. It's like, okay, you can do that, but hey, yeah, we're really close to the cause. Let's examine this, right? So I'm gonna make another video about oxalates, but oxalates and histamines especially. But just a little summary of that. Histamines, there's foods like cacao, tea, yerba mate, coffee, but especially cacao, which I drank this morning, by the way, 3 tablespoons worth, that are not only high in oxalates, but also directly contributing histamine, the neurotransmitter itself, as well as enzyme inhibitors. So there's the DAO enzyme that normally would break down histamine in your body and the circulation. These foods like yerba mate and cacao actually contain inhibitors that stop your body from breaking down histamine, which can contribute to skin blemishes and skin rashes and eczema and hives and allergic reactions and all these things, brain fog, dizziness, and they contribute. So not only do they actually provide histamine, but they also provide histamine breakdown inhibitors, and they can also have molecules that trigger the release of histamine, right? So if you think of caffeine, it triggers the release of adrenaline, right? Stimulates the release of adrenaline rather than providing it directly. Well, some of these foods can trigger the release of histamine. So Yeah, so we'll talk more about that in another video, right? And so if you remove these foods that contribute, then that can definitely contribute, right? And another thing, people who think that raw meat, is better than cooked meat. If you're eating raw meat's higher in histamines. If you notice when you eat foods like that, like cacao, for example, that has all these histamine things, right? Anyway, we'll make that, we'll freaking make another video about that. But just something to keep in mind is that raw meat is most likely higher in histamines. And when you cook it, you're probably killing off a lot of at least bacterial or originated contributors to histamine release and things like that. Because a lot of it's the bacteria on the meat that can contribute. But yeah, there's a lot more to talk about in regards to that. So leave a question, comments down below, and I'll talk till next time.